Hi, it's my sheer pleasure to welcome you in this brand new video series devoted to the black repertoire after move 1 e4. Unlike most video courses, this course actually recommends two full repertoires in just one course. And for this repertoire purposes, I've picked two rather unknown yet very interesting sidelines. So obviously we've got a lot of very theoretically sound, like most sound choices, such as e5, for example, which is a move I've not only played for my entire life, but I've even written a book on it. You've got, you've got Sicilian, you've got the Caro-Kann, you've got the French, but the downside is, for many club players, for most club players, this is a daunting problem. This is a huge issue that you need to know a ton. You need to know so many theoretical options white has and how to encounter them. So I've decided that in this course I wouldn't be chasing the theoretical soundness and computers, approval and 0-0 in evaluation in every line. Instead, I'll go for two variations which cut down on theory as much as possible and which give us very interesting, fun and fighting positions to work with. So the first systems that I'm suggesting here runs d6, and after d4, knight f6, knight c3, we are looking at a very interesting line c6, which is way less popular and way less known than the Perk and then the Philidor, and in fact it happens to be a little bit of a mixture of both. So with the move c6, black doesn't define his plans yet, and he says, okay, for example, after f3, he can play e5 and get the Philidor position. It's just that white already made the pretty dumb move f3, which disables him from playing f4 and prevents him from going knight f3, hitting the pawn. So if needed, black can switch to such positions. If needed, black can easily switch to the Perk positions at some point as well. So these positions tend to be highly interesting. Now, the type of positions that you'll be getting will really depend on white's next move. There are two main lines here, which are knight f3 and f4. If white goes knight f3, we continue bishop g4, intending to first get the bishop outside of the pawn chain and later play e6 and d5. If that happens, we'll get a typical French or a typical Caro-Kann sort of a pawn structure, where actually the bishop will be already outside of the pawn chain, which of course is fantastic for us. Now, I'm not trying to make it sound like black, easily achieves everything he's looking to get and immediately gets an advantage or wins by force or something. Of course, I'm not trying to lie to you and say I've refuted the game of chess or the move 1e4. But while there are still some theoretical problems for black to solve, conceptually, this opening is very healthy. And, of course, most white players at a club level and more advanced than that tournament level, at a level of 2,000, 2,100 FIDE, they'll have no idea what's happening here. It's a very rare line. For example, here, if you look at the database in this position, you will understand that the Perk and the Philidor each are like 5 or 6 times as popular as the move c6. So white players don't even get to this position all that often because there is, other systems like e5 or c5 and move 1 car or French, and then when they do, they see the move c6 once in like 10 or 11 games, which clearly doesn't make them particularly willing to study it deeply, and that's exactly what we want to benefit from. So the rising positions, I think, after knight f3, bishop g4 are very fun for black. Now, white can also play the move f4, which is more challenging theoretically, requires more precise knowledge from black, and here black has a couple of possibilities. Bishop g4 is possible, even though I don't like it. g6 is very possible as well, because now, look, for example, in the Perk, if we play the Perk right away, white has so many systems here. f4, or the classical knight f3, bishop e2, or the system with bishop g5 and then queen d2, or system bishop e3 or bishop f4 and then queen d2, which are all slightly different. White can play stuff with g3, bishop g2. White can play stuff with, for example, f3. White has so many possibilities. And once he commits to the move f4, if you like the Perk, but don't like some of those systems, you can easily play g6 and get to the perk where you have cut out so many white options. And yeah, there's a downside. You've committed to the move c6, which is not necessarily the best line after white plays f4 in the perk, but, well, you've also achieved a lot. And but the main move and the best move, I think, is queen a5, where the rising positions tend to be very fun and very exciting. And I definitely agree that white, if he is prepared, he is capable of retaining a slight advantage. However, it doesn't matter. You've got to understand, you're facing human beings. You're not facing ancients or top grandmasters who will just wipe you out of the, wipe you off the board if you make, you know, one slightest mistake. You're playing human beings who would be very uncomfortable playing a system they are not that well versed in. And very importantly, what really matters is whether you are aware of the typical plans, whether you know very well what you're doing, where your pieces want to go, what you want to trade, what you want to achieve, as opposed to, you know, chasing some plus 030 according to the ancient, which most players cannot even tell if it's better or not. So these positions tend to be very exciting, and I'm very delighted to be showing them to you. Now, on our way here, we've also got to study a couple alternatives such as f3 or bishop d3, which tend to be very serious theoretical moves, or even such a move as knight d2, which looks quite lame, but even after that move you still need to know what you're doing. And of course we're doing all of that. A good news as well is that if you ever want to switch, let's say, to the Philidor and play e5 after knight c3, knight c3, e5, if you study this repertoire, well, you'll already know what to do versus f3 and versus bishop d3, which happen to be rather, as I said, challenging theoretical possibilities. So you'll only need to pick a couple of lines, not the whole thing from a new. Then, something that's very important, and I'm very happy that I've done that, is this. So to my huge surprise, most analysis and most books, courses on the Philidor or perk start discussing only the rising position. But in fact, white also has a move knight c3 here, which can be actually quite challenging, if not theoretically then practically. For example, you go knight f6, white plays not d4 but f4. Now, what do? If you play c5, you end up in the Sicilian, which you most likely have no idea about considering you're studying the Chef perk, right? Or Philidor. And, well, I'm just assuming you don't play the Sicilian or some other openings. So you'll be in a lot of trouble if you go here, because lines like this, where, for example, white quickly tries to play bishop c4, and then castle, and then throw a lot of kitchen sink at you with d3, f5, queen e1, queen h4, bishop h6, knight g5, well, they tend to be a problem. So they're absolutely, of course, you know, harmless for black theoretically, but you need to really know what you're doing. And of course, our strong preference is not to go to the Sicilian from a different opening if possible. So here, I've discussed a couple of possibilities we can go for, which involve playing d5 and playing e5. And objectively speaking, both of these moves, I think, are not best. I think clearly the best move here is c5, going for the harmless version of the Sicilian, but practically both of them are absolutely, you know, are very, well, they allow you to cut down on the need for theoretical research a ton, and they're very sound as well. White might be able to stay slightly better after both of them, but those are very interesting playable positions. And I'm very happy that we've got this covered. So you have one full repertoire already versus one e4. And of course, I'm also covering such moves as, say, g3 in this position or some other random stuff which is not really popular, but you might want to know. Now, I wanted to give you a backup line, and that line is a little kind of too funky for it to be a separate repertoire, so I thought it would be a very good idea to have two repertoires, because you wouldn't need to know a lot anyway. So, the next line we are discussing runs knight f6, the Alekhine, but a very special Alekhine. And, well, of course, after knight c3, black has no theoretical worries. I would much rather just go e5 and play e4, e5, where white cut down and cannot play the Italian, the Scotch, the Ruy Lopez, and has to, you know, stick to some lame 4 knights or something dull like this. But I understand you might not want to do that. And of course you can play d6 and just get to a position we had just discussed, which is actually quite, you know, nice, because possibly you just want to experiment with the move order, but are not ready to meet this Alekhine, and then you just go back to your stuff. A lot of flexibility, a lot of versatility involved in this repertoire. But also, of course, the real Alekhine move would be d5, and we are discussing in detail both e5 and e5, and I think the rising positions tend to be absolutely fine for black theoretically. We do need to know what we're doing, but black equalizes without significant issues. Now, the real threat, of course, to the Alekhine, and by the way, we also cover all the crappy moves like, say, knight f3, or bishop c4, or d3, and they're all stupid, but you need to have some idea of what to do. But of course, the main threat to Alekhine is the move pawn to e5. And here, I've decided to recommend a very weird, a very sketchy looking, yet a very interesting move, knight to g8. Now, before you start laughing and before you close the window with this video, I would like to say that I have some credentials to boast of. Namely, Carlsen played this line, Mamedyarov played this line, several grandmasters played this line, I played this line. Well, that some of you can consider a disadvantage, as it spoils the average rating of the list I had just brought up. But seriously though, I really believe that this line is in fact a lot more complicated than people think it is. And after d4, d6, it's either ed6 or knight f3, the two main moves that white tends to try. But I believe that after both, for example ed6 here, if you just compare this position with, let's say, the classical Alekhine, which arises after knight d5, let's say d4, d6, c4, sorry, knight b6, ed6, and again black has both moves, both possibilities. I really cannot understand why would the knight be worse on g8 than it is on b6, because here, after say ed6, black can play g6, bishop g7, and plants the knight on e7, which is not possible there. He can play knight f6 as well, he can play cd6 too, and the knight doesn't necessarily want to be on b6 at all. These positions tend to be very interesting, and many grandmasters, as we will see, really misplay them as white. So yeah, white objectively of course keeps some advantage, there is no doubt, but practically it's super exciting. And finally, the main theoretical kind of challenge here would be the move knight f3. And as I'm mentioning, there is also a very interesting move f4, which is for some reason not really being used, but I think it's very challenging as well. We need to know what we're doing. And after knight f3, in fact, it all started, I think, well, initially, of course, it started as a joke, the kind of, well, life of this variation, because Carlsen played a game at a World Blitz Championship versus Laurent Fressinet, a French grandmaster rated over 2700, who happens to be Carlsen's second for many years. And apparently either Carlsen didn't want to compete with him in the lines they looked at together, or he just wanted to mock him a little bit, or whatever it is, but he played the move knight g8, and that's the position they got. And Carlsen went on to win a lovely game, having outplayed Laurent in a very nice positional manner. And since then, many grandmasters, such as say Mamedyarov, started using this line occasionally. And, most likely, if you're a titled player, you would not want to play this in a classical game. You'd use it in Blitz, Rapid, and so on. And I've used it in a bunch of Blitz and Rapid versus Masters, Grandmasters. But if you're a club-level player, if you want to really not study any theory, which, is not always the right thing to do, objectively, but you might be a busy person with a full-time job, you just might not be able to, then, a line like this could be, in fact, quite interesting for you, quite an interesting shortcut. Sometimes you're just facing an opponent you don't want to compete in theory with. Sometimes you just want to have fun and play something different, and this line tends to be exactly the solution. So, here are two repertoires, in fact, in one course, and this course is not overwhelmingly large in terms of the amount of theory, amount of videos. And I definitely think that, yeah, well, you might not like one of those lines, but you'll definitely like the other one, and hopefully you'll like two, because I personally really love both of them a lot. Now, I also, of course, wanted to show you not just theory, and because, as you might know from many of my previous courses, both here, for this company and for some other companies, I tend to emphasize that it's very important to study middle game and end game and tactical ideas and plans as opposed to, raw theoretical opening moves. So not only did I teach you the theory here in this course, but also I've referred to a number of Grandmaster games and a number of my own games, in fact, in both of these variations, which of course would give you a much better idea of what's happening. Now, what else? So we've got two repertoires, two full repertoires. We've got a bunch of model games, and we've got two lines which, in my opinion, really deserve a lot more attention than they're currently getting. And they are getting attention, mostly in Blitz and Rapid, but both of them are getting a lot of actually, interest. They are enjoying a lot of popularity, even at a Super Grandmaster level. For example, this variation, after e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, c6. For example, Mamedjarov has been playing it consistently in Rapid. For example, Akopian, a Grandmaster over 2700, now less, but he used to be over 2700, played it a ton in classical chess. So apparently things are not simple here. It's a very interesting line. So I'm extremely, willing to have you give them a try, have you practice them, and succeed with them. I have put a lot of effort in this course, and I'm really, really excited about seeing you succeed and seeing you fall in love with these systems. Best of luck, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.